Before I start tonight's presentation, it behooves me to offer my sincerest gratitude to the hosts, my dear friends Ed and Cindy Harris, and to my dearest Talmud, Ari Moshe. We love you dearly. You're like family to me, or I'm like family to you. One of the two. It should always be in reciprocation. I've had the pleasure to give hundreds, if not thousands, of classes on dating and shalom bayis. I wanted to challenge myself and take a different track tonight. I have the pleasure of spending the summer in Tom's River with my married children, and it happens to be that the local Jewish library is really amazingly stocked. It got my attention this summer, the whole series of Nesiva Shalom. I happen to have used a lot of his material for the Bein HaMetzarim, which was the time of Tisha B'Av and Shabbat Tammuz. I said, let's see what else he has in store. And I found the book sefer that he wrote, he has a set of 13 or 14, and it's called in Hebrew, B'chokhmah Yivane Bayit. With wisdom shall you build your home. And as I started going through it, I was pretty fascinated. You know, it's interesting, I think I've read quite a few books on the subject, lectured on it quite extensively, but there's always something new to learn. Let's start where he gets those three words from. Oh, by the way, for the audience here and for audience there, anybody who needs my help in any way in shalom bayis or dating or coaching or getting matched up, you can reach me on my website, drjackdating.com, or my cell phone number, 305-206-1916, or just write me an email to drjackcohen18@gmail.com. Okay, here we go. In Mishlei, Shlomo Melech writes, "B'chokhmah yivnei bayis, u'b'tvuna yitbonan, u'b'da'as chachadar yimalu kol chon yarkav v'naim." A house shall be built with wisdom and firmly established with understanding, and with knowledge shall the rooms become filled with all types of plenty. As I sit in my office, whether it's in Tom's River in Brooklyn, and I ponder the incredible shalom bayis issues that I have to deal with now, recently, on a regular basis. I'm dealing with a case right now which is already they're on their second divorce, both of them. And I think it needs to go to divorce. I'm being fought. Usually I like to save these things. And I see where there wasn't a yesod built. Let's ask the question. Could you imagine building a house without first engaging an architect? If a person would impulsively just begin piecing a house together on his own with no plan, it would certainly become, have as a collection, it would just collapse. So therefore, we must enlist the services of a professional to devise a sensible working plan. How do we build this house? Only once a blueprint has been drawn up is it possible to even begin to build the building phase. So how does one go about formulating such a plan to ensure that the bias rests on the most solid foundation? Shlomo HaMelech offers great counsel in this when he declares, "B'chokhmah yibane bayis." With wisdom shall you build your house and establish it with understanding. Let's take a little break and move into, because we're doing all Hasidic stuff tonight. Let's move to Breslov now. Rav Shalom writes, and I'm going to translate it in Hebrew. The purpose of the reason why we're in this world is to establish a connection to Hashem. If that being the case, then wouldn't it be more logical for me to be able to serve Hashem single? Why do I need all the responsibilities of being married? Marriage entails mortgage. Marriage entails tuition payments. Marriage entails all types of kids going to the orthodontist and all kinds of responsibilities. Isn't it much easier for me to serve Hashem if I would be single? That's a case that we can make, right? If you want me to serve you, Hashem, and the purpose why you put me into this world, the tachlis of this world is for me to be dovik to you, to be connected to you. So why do I have to go through the process of getting married, which only seems to distance me from you? Right? And the Gemara says, "Shanosi isha rechaim al savaro." Whoever gets married, he has an albatross on his neck. What do I need it for? And at the same time, to contrast that, we see that in the Torah, two great tzaddikim, Nadav, right, and his brother, passed away because they refused to get married. So the question is strengthened. Madua yeshna chova l'schaten? Why is there a responsibility to get married? Or if all it does is just distance me from Hashem? Listen to the answer. The Zohar brings down that when Hashem created the first creation, it was Zachar and Nekeva connected, male and female. That means a person must be married in order to be able to invite Hashem down. Hashem will not come into that house or to that apartment unless there's a nekeva, because the Shekhinah comes from the female side. As long as a person is not married, they're considered chatzi guf, according to Moshe Cordovero. So you want to come and tell me that you want to serve Hashem and you don't want all the responsibilities and the annoyances of marriage? I'm going to tell you there's no way you can even hit the bar unless you're married. My Rabbi, Rav Miller, would tell us, marriage is the great silver refining process. That's how you remove all the dross of your life. There, you learn how to share. One of the problems I encounter with older singles is that they're comfortable. They're 38, they have their condo, they have their car, they have their favorite Chinese food that they like to order in. Why should I rock the boat? But marriage says you don't live just for yourself. You live for someone else, for your children, for your wife, and through that process, you become great. Let me read it to you. Through the framework of marriage, with all its hardships and all its challenges, is how you become great. So Avodas Hashem is not sitting in the base measures for 10, 11 hours a day. Avodas Hashem is getting up at 3 in the morning to go to CVS because your wife needs A&D ointment for the baby. That's the greatest level of Avodas Hashem. And you can only hit that bar when you're married. And that's why you need to get married. You can't use that cop-out, well, Hashem, I don't want all the responsibilities and obligations of marriage because it only will cause me to be distance greater. No, you'll never even get 50% there. That's why marriage, and along the way, marriage refines us. We become unselfish, we learn to have to become selfless. We become greedy, we learn to know how to share. It's not just about us anymore, it's just about you, me, myself, and I. So, we're faced with a dilemma. What kind of house does Hashem want us to build? To which level of Avodas Hashem does He aspire us to get? This is a matter that requires our determination and understanding. And the Yetzer Hara is going to do everything that they can to derail our plans. So we know the famous Chazal, Ish v'isha zachu, if a man and woman are zoche merit, Shechina b'neihem, the Shechina, Hashem's divine, existence, comes to dwell with them. Lo zachu, but if they don't merit, Eish ochaltan, a fire eats them up. The question is asked, why do we have such diverse opposites? If they get along, the Shekhinah comes. If they don't get along, they'll be consumed in hell. Why can't you just tell me, if they get along, the Shekhinah comes? If they don't get along, the Shekhinah doesn't come. What's with the opposites? Major reward if you do right, major horrific punishment if you do wrong. And the answer is something fascinating, and that is, there's no middle ground. There's no mediocrity. You either go for greatness or you're a loser. That's what it comes down to. It says there's no such thing as compromise in establishing a great home. When a servant of Hashem enters married life, there's only 2 paths available to us. And that is, I'm either going to stand still or I'm either going to move. But it can't be in the middle. Either we grow and we forge ahead to make the best home that we can make, or it's not going to go. We don't allow for mediocrity. As a result, we're not given the choice. If you don't get along, no Shekhinah. If you don't get along, you can really hit the abyss. So we're challenged here by Chazal to go for it all. The Yetzer Hara is going to bristle at such a notion. Is it really so terrible just to have an average lifestyle? Isn't there room just to live the good life and remain a good Jew by staying away from prohibitions? Why do I have to aspire for the spiritual top? And the Tzivur Shalom tells us there is no room to settle for mediocrity, especially in our current generation. In previous times, we said only the elite would be great spiritually. But today, with what's going on in the world, it's a completely different set of circumstances. On one hand, it's like Charles Dickens. Today we live in what's called, how he starts his book, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. We have more Torah being learned today worldwide than in the history of the world. But on the other hand, we're losing Jews faster than we can throw them off the mountain. We're losing them at a crazy rate. And so it behooves us that we have to try our hardest to push for the greatest standard that we can hit. And it's proven by the following. Chazal tell us, Ein ben David ba, Ela bedor shekulu zakai or kulu chayev. Mashiach will only come unless the generation is all righteous or all evil. How do we understand that? Again, let's repeat that. Ein ben David ba, the son of David will not come unless the door is kulo zakai or kulo chayev, unless it's all good or all evil. How do we understand that? The Navi tells us that Hashem, prior to the sin of Adam HaRishon, there was light and there was darkness. That was it. Once the sin took place, they became intertwined. When Mashiach comes, they're going to revert back to the way things used to be. Clear. No mixture whatsoever. So if the door is completely righteous, they're separate. Everyone sees the light and the dark. And if the door is completely evil, same story. We've separated them. And that's the mission. But here's our job. We have to put out that light as much as possible. That's the key. We have to choose life, and we have to try to bring forth light to others. Hashem does not put a person in a position that they can't overcome. He doesn't put us in an impossible situation. And so the Torah does not demand anything from a Jew that is truly beyond their capabilities. What happens? Why do people get into trouble when it comes to Shalom Bayis? And here Rav Nachman Breslov says something fascinating. The Yetzer Hara always David call his sukkah. He forsakes all the things he tries to get people to do. Hey Joey, why don't you go in and have a cheeseburger at McDonald's today? Yossi, don't put on tefillin today. Those are small things. He focuses his guns on one thing, trying to disturb Shalom Bayis. That's where he goes to work. The Goren Bar Musa, and through his clever tricks, he does whatever he can to destroy the Shalom Bayis. Those are his really pet projects. Things like, I didn't put my tzitzis on is small time for him. He doesn't care about that. What he cares about, what he really wants to do is to disrupt the Shalom Bayis in the homes. And how does he do that? So, one of the tricks that he has up his sleeve, he starts to thread the idea into one of the people, one of the partners in a relationship or in a marriage. She's not the one. He's not the one. You made a mistake. You blew it. It's unbelievable. I had this discussion with a friend of mine. He's 30 plus years married, and he's telling me 2 weeks ago, he says to me, yeah, I have to start considering divorce. All my friends are going that direction. I probably didn't make the right decision. See how he can do it? Not 6 months into marriage, 30 plus years into marriage. And this is a guy who's a stable guy that's a gabbai in a very prominent shul in Flatbush. So what does the Yetzer Hara do? He starts threading an idea into our head. You made a mistake. You could have done better. I hear this all the time from people. I could have done better. And this is how he starts his attack in a very insidious fashion. And what does he do? How does he do that? He introduces some sort of kishayim, some sort of hardship. The husband loses his job. The woman goes through some sort of crisis in health. And they're not equipped to deal with the Yetzer Hara. And he catches them in a weak moment, and then he's like, in football, there's a big thing when you go and you sideswipe the guy by the knees. He takes you down by the knees, because you're not ready. You're not ready because you didn't come to classes like this. You understand? To know what to say. And that's what happens. Therefore, we're here tonight because we want those tools. We want to be able to access those tools so that he's not going to be able to blindside us. We have to cultivate a vision of the type of marriage and life we want and what standards that we intend to impose in our home. And that way we'll free ourselves of any confusion. Now, with that in mind, let's start with one thing, and I'm going to share an incredible story with you. Who are our friends? Because our friends are critical to how we think and how we behave. So let me share an amazing story with you about a woman in Israel. I come from a traditional family. Initially, we were not very observant. We had moved from a Middle Eastern country, so it's Sephardic, and we were enrolled in religious schools in Israel. I was an exceptionally good girl, a real tzaddikis. And I stayed that way as I grew up. I'm telling you the truth because I'm going to share something with you she tells us now. I married a Ben Torah from a fine Jewish home. We both had high aspirations to build a beautiful home. And quickly we had put together 6 children, closely spaced. My husband was a model husband. I was a model wife. He was the king, I was the queen. We would sit on Shabbos, we would speak, we would eat, we would chat, we would drink, we would have fun time. We devoted to each other's needs, and together we were devoted to our children. And for 10 years it was nice and stable and good. Today I look back on those years and I think about the years that I had. But we needed money. And I started looking for work. All through those first 10 years of marriage, it was one income home, the husband. Now she was going to go out to work. I found a job with a company that paid a decent salary. Some of the women who worked were religious, some were not. It was a big company. They hired all types of people. For the first month, I focused on working for my paycheck and nothing more. I came in, did my work, went home, boom. And then, Esther came into my life. She was a non-religious woman in her 50s, a kind soul who couldn't hurt a fly, who was like a mother to all us young women. She had no children of her own, unfortunately never even got married. I became good friends with her. And don't ask me how, but she drew me into her world. Not that she preached against religion, she simply told me that that wasn't part of her life. But she started to entice me with the interests of the secular world. After a couple of years, I have to share something with you. My hashkafos became completely rotten. Secular books, music, and movies became part of my life. I continued playing my role robotically to my husband, but not with the same pure-hearted dedication that I once used to. And then one day, my husband picked up my iPod, and he started listening to some of the songs that I was listening to. He was shocked. I had never listened to songs like this before. I grabbed my iPod from him and he said, "What do you want?" He said, "What is this music you listen to?" "I'll do what I please. You're not going to tell me a thing." He had never been spoken to like that by her before in his life from his wife. My husband's stunned expression saw that we had hit a whole different chapter in our marriage. From there, things only got worse. I told my friend Esther what happened at home, and she told me, "You're not going to put up with that. Defend yourself." My husband was completely baffled. What happened to his pure wife? It was like someone had changed the combination to the master lock. His wife was no longer accessible to him. And from there on began a year of fighting until I found myself in Beis Din, where my husband gave me my get. Eventually, we parted ways. I received my get. After that, we had some tension. My husband got remarried, started a new household, things settled down. And I entered a phase of my life that if I could pay $1 million to erase, I would. Welcome to the world of single parenting. You don't want to go there. It's hell. Believe me. And if you have any alternative, don't go there. I won't elaborate. I'll just say that thousands of divorced women are going around today in a terrible state spiritually, socially, and financially. I'm not making this up. I was involved in a divorce with a 45-year-old woman. She sort of egged it on herself, and the man said enough's enough, and that was it. She calls me up 3 weeks ago, and she says to me, "I heard it's okay to sleep around as long as I go to the mikveh." I said to her, "In my book, you're a zona. That's what you are, like a prostitute. Is that what you want to be?" So she says to me, "Oh, I get it. Okay, thank you for clarifying that." Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of this stuff is going on, unfortunately. And this is what she's spelling out here. Most of my new friends I met had initiated their divorces, as I had, and in most cases their husbands had not wanted to get divorced. We're not here to decide who's right and who's wrong. I just want to remember the premise of the story are friends. It hurt me to see how attached my children were to their father. I was ashamed to admit it, but if there was a competition, I was the loser. My oldest son one day told me when I came to pick him up, "Ima, I love you very much. But I remember the Ima that I had when we were living together, and I missed that Ima. I wish he would come back." 10 more years passed. My former husband had 3 more children with his second wife. Total of 6 kids with his new wife, and he had 3 with her. I must admit that she behaved so nicely towards me. She never said a word against me. To the children, even I wasn't careful to be so nice to her. She led more of a promiscuous lifestyle now. Now she says something fascinating. My husband's new wife got sick with cancer. I was forced to take care of my children, the 3, plus I would help her with her 6. That means she's doing a total of 9. And for the next 2 years, she spent more time in the hospital than at home. It was a very difficult time. And everyone could clearly see where this was heading. I would bring her children to visit her time to time in the hospital. One day, when I came with my 16-year-old son, she asked if he could wait downstairs because she wanted to talk to me privately. This is the new wife and the ex-wife. Once we were alone, she began to speak, and it looked like she rehearsed what she wanted to say. She said to me, Naomi, I know that my days are numbered, and I'll be leaving behind my husband and 9 children. I want to thank you for being a decent ex-wife. You could have ruined our lives, and you didn't, but there's something more important I want to tell you. A woman knows the heart of her husband. I want you to know that my husband, who's your ex-husband, never got over the hurt of you leaving him and divorcing him. He hasn't spoken about it, but you just know your husband's heart. You know what's going on in his heart. I want to talk about the future. I want you to do something for me. I'm going to probably be leaving this world very soon. I want you to remarry him. I didn't answer her. I was overwhelmed by her graciousness and her nobility. And I embraced her for a long time. I came out of the room in shock. I couldn't communicate with my son. And when I got home, I shut myself in my bedroom. The next week, we received the news that my husband's new wife had returned her soul to her creator. I attended the Levaya, and during the Shiva, I provided meals for all the children and my husband. After the Shloshim, a messenger arrived from Beis Din and told me that the deceased had written in her will that she would like her husband to marry his first wife again. I started to cry, and I told him that I already knew about it. And I told him the answer is yes. I decided to straightforward that was about what I was going to do. I'd already paid a high price for my ego games. We had a few dates. We talked about what happened and closed the door on the past. I wanted to tell him about this spiritual low point that I fell to. He didn't want to hear about it. He only wanted to know, can you just go back to being the wife you used to be? I told him I would. We remarried, and my husband fulfilled the rare mitzvah of remarrying the woman he had divorced under the most rarest of circumstances. So that's the point that I want to make. Who are your friends? Be very careful. Let's keep going. We must seize the opportune moments to develop ourselves into decision makers and realize what kind of home do we want to build. I was having this conversation with a girl from Toronto yesterday who calls me up, 21-year-old girl, 22 maybe, first guy to go out with, it's just first girl, remember those days. Anyway, and she's dating someone who is not as FFB as she is. And she's wondering about some of the friends that he has. And I said to her, you have to check into that a little bit more. It's very important. I told her when I remember now my 30-year-old girl, she's a big teacher in the colleges and she runs a big Kiruv program for the Syrian community in Brooklyn. When she was 3 years old and her sister was 2 years old, I had done a surgical procedure on one of the very big mashpi'im or mashpi'ot of the Syrian community, a woman that teaches some very, very serious classes today in Chovot Levavot, Misai Sharim, and she says something fascinating to me. We all have been sending our kids to the same school system, and it's a very good school system in Brooklyn. She says, just because it says XYZ on the house or on the report card doesn't mean they're welcome into my home. That means just because they're classmates doesn't mean every kid is entitled to come. You have to make decisions as a husband and a wife, what's going to be allowed in that house. And you have to be firm with those decisions. Because if you're wishy-washy, you're not going to be able to have a direct GPS in life. That's important. You need to be able to be what's called, the Nesiv Shalom says, you need to be a balach latachla. Lachlit means to make a decision, to decide. What do I want in my house? What resolutions will I undertake, and who am I allowing into the house? That's very important. Okay. Once we get married, life will test us. So let's go through some of the material that the Nesiv Shalom brings down. There are times in life which weaken the koiches, which weaken the abilities or the power of people to be able to go through life. Such as if there's an illness in the family, or there are obligations or debts, or problems at work, or loss of work. This is the time that we have to rise to the occasion and show the depth of our midos. Instead of attacking, we have to accept that whatever happens to us in life, this chazek b'simcha, when we go through challenges in life, in your home, we're going to know who the real you is. Outside, it's Purim. Everyone's got masks on. At work, you're not going to show your true colors because you don't want to lose your job. At home is where you can be a tyrant, whether a man or a woman. So how will you deal with your challenges in life? Will you approach them b'simcha? Will you approach them with emunah, with tefillah, with doing tshuva, which is what Hashem wants from us when He sends us challenges in life? Right? Will you show increased mercy to people? To your wife? Sablanus yitera. Will you show more patience? That's what's expected of us. Right? Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, when he talks about Klal Yisrael and they were really pressing him. It says, Vayar b'siblotam. He felt their pain. Will you feel your spouse's pain? That's what's expected of us. Especially, God forbid, if we're dealing with a couple that hasn't had kids yet, and the pain that the woman goes through, and the feeling that she has to endure while she doesn't have children. So we have to know that you have to embark on a career of working on your midos, which calls for more generosity, which calls for greater patience. It's expanding your bandwidth, so that when you're challenged with a crisis in life, you don't buckle. That's very important. Let me share an incredible story with you. The Rav Shalom Arush brings down. Tells about a kolel, avrech in his kolel. Kolel younger man, who for whatever reason did something inappropriate. He could not have kids. But he didn't tell the girl that he got married to that he was not able to have children. And guess what? She had the same problem. And she didn't tell him that she couldn't have children. And they both got married to each other. So she was embarrassed to tell him about her problem. He was embarrassed to reveal his problem to her. So they both get married. Achar chatuna, after the wedding, and you're having relations now, they revealed to each other their issues. And you can't hide anymore. Now the problem's out. They went to all types of physicians in Eretz Yisrael and Israel, and they said, sorry, there's no hope for you people. Based on what we see and on the results of medical tests, it's not possible for this couple, for you people, to have kids. Right? All the doctors that they went to, the top specialists in Israel who deal with infertility, said, there's no hope. So they came to Rav Shalom Arush, and he advised, say thank you. And he explained to them, you were born with a certain tikkun to come into this world for whatever reason and pass the journey of no children. Every day, take 15 to 20 minutes and say thank you Hashem for the fact that we have no kids. When you say that, you accept what Hashem has in store for you, and you're not fighting that anymore. And when you say thank you, it'll protect you from being rebellious and feeling God was not good to you. 2 weeks ago, I had a 30-year-old girl in front of me who came to see me. She's the daughter of a guy that I grew up with. My daughters are her age. She was married for 1.5 years to an abusive guy and got divorced. Because she didn't have any solid training in Emunah and accepting the challenge, she rebelled. She left the Jewish community. She came in with tattoos from here to there and lives in a completely Gentile area now. So I said to her, what's the problem? God was evil to me. God was bad with me. I said, I changed the name. Let's just call her Yehudis. Hashem gave us Bechira, free will. He doesn't get in the way of decisions that we make. We make our own decisions, and the results are, whatever they may be. We all make mistakes, and that's part of our journey in this world. He didn't do it to hurt you. You have to accept it, file it into your archive, and move forward. You've got to move forward. That's the key. So he said to them, by saying thank you, you'll accept it, you won't be bitter at Hashem, and you press forward. So they said to themselves, what do we have to lose? We tried the doctors, nothing's working. So they embarked on this new career for a few months of saying 15 to 20 minutes every day, thank you for the fact that we were born infertile, thank you for our difficulty that we can't have kids. Sof kol sof, Baruch Hashem, they ended up having 3 children. The power of gratitude, the power of changing things. It's very important. And we can access that as well in our lives when we have our own difficulties. One of the first blessings that we recite every morning as part of Birchas HaShachar is Shelo Asani Goy. Thank you, Hashem, for not making me a Goy. And the Saba Kadisha of Slonim says that here we have to ask ourselves, when we say that bracha, what is it about me that acts like a Gentile? What have I taken on and embraced in my hashkafa that makes me act like that? And by being careful with my exposure to the outside world, to external media influences, we're no longer living in shtetls in Eastern Europe or Northern Africa. And as a result, we are bombarded by all types of messages in our cell phones, in our iPads, and all our devices. And without realizing it, it has an insidious effect on us. And it creeps up on us to the point where when we see things that happen or breakups, or how do we understand that when we've been seeing Schaefer sitting in Doma, he's a major writer, and he's listening to a conversation of 3 guys having steak dinners, and one of them saying to his friends, darn it, I got married too late in my mid-30s. I'm not going to get a good shot at a second wife now. It's already pre-programmed into their psyche that I'm going for number 2. What happened to do whatever it takes to stay with number 1? This is the insidious culture of the media and how it affects us in many ways. So we have to be careful. Has the influence of the Goyim infiltrated our mind? And what are we doing to ensure that the service of Hashem remains pure and holy? I have to share an amazing story with you. David and Shira Alter were married for 15 years with no kids. And we know the halacha is unfortunately clear. After 10 years, you can say to your wife, we tried, nice, here's your get. I have to Mekayim Peruvu. With tears in their eyes, they approached Beis Din after 15 years of marriage to go through the process of getting divorced. The couple entered the room again, and if Shekhinah was crying, the amount of tears that were shed in that room could fill up cups. He had moved out to a tiny apartment in Bnei Brak, and he was about to leave his apartment one day when the phone rang. He was going to go learn in the Beis Medrash. He thought maybe it was just a quick call. Okay, I'll pick it up. But what happened next stunned him. It was Shira on the phone. She was crying. There was something in her voice, thick with emotion. Shira, what happened? Talk to me. She was sobbing and sobbing, couldn't get the words out. What happened? I mean, they left on great terms. David Yisrael, I just found out I'm expecting. He felt like someone took a hammer and hit him on the head. He ran through the streets of the city, his mind racing with the implications of what he just learned. He's going to become a father. Okay, no problem. I'll remarry Shira and we'll live happily ever after, except we have one problem. What is it? He's a Cohen. Too late. But you're a Cohen. The little voice screams, soundless, you can't remarry Shira, no matter what. His head's spinning now. What's going on? 15 years married, I get divorced. She calls me up 2 months later, she's expecting, I can't remarry her. What is going on? So the little voice in his head, he's in Bnei Brak, it was a few years ago, go to Rav Chaim. If there's anyone who can handle this challenge in this world, is Rav Chaim Kanievsky. He reached Rav Chaim's home, where the Gabbai saw how broken and distraught he looked, and a slump of his shoulders, and he said, wait a few minutes, the Gadol will be coming in soon. So when Rav Chaim came into the room, he related the story to him with tears running down his cheeks. And Rav Chaim said, nothing to be done. The facts are unalterable. Can't do anything. 15 years of being married, and now his wife is expecting a baby after he was divorced. Rav Chaim, is there nothing I can do? Nothing? He says, only thing I can tell you is, go to Yerushalayim to my father-in-law. At the time he was alive, Rabbi Yosef Shalom Elyashiv, the Gadol Hador. Ask his advice. I don't know what to tell you. Not knowing how Rabbi Yosef could possibly help him, but trusting in the Emunus Chachamim and Gedolim, he got on the bus for Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim and made the trek to Rabbi Elyashiv's home. And there the saga continued, where Yosef Shalom Elyashiv listened sympathetically to this hapless Cohen, whose life had turned literally from day to choshech, to darkness. The Gadol says it's the decree from Shemayim. You have to accept Hashem's plan. But my life's over, he tells him. How do I just accept it? As he's just about to part and put his hand on the doorknob, Rabbi Elyashiv says, I have one suggestion for you. One idea. Leave my house. Go straight to the Koisel right now. And when you get there, you daven to Hashem like you never davened in your life. Daven for your future. Daven for somehow this terrible decree should be averted. That's what I'm telling you to do. Go to the Koisel now and daven. He didn't understand how could that possibly change anything. But if the Gadol told him to do so, that's what he's going to do. So he heads off to the Koisel. And there he picks up his Tehillim and he begs Hashem to help him like he had been there before, but on a different level. People stood and watched the stranger pleading for his life. Every bystander wished they could possibly help him. He's crying and he's shaking the heavens. A man approached him and tapped him on the shoulder. David Yisrael, swollen with eyes full of tears, turned to meet the warm gaze of this stranger, and the stranger says to him, Sir, what's wrong? For the third time that day, David Yisrael unburdened himself and told him the story. He tells him, do you have a father? He was taken aback by the question. What do you mean? Doesn't everyone have a father in Shalom? No, do you have a physical, biological father? Yes. My father lives in America. He's still alive. He lives in a rehabilitation/nursing home. He's very old and very sick. And he can't even take care of himself. And from what I hear, he doesn't even talk. The man looks at him and goes, go see him. But my father can't speak. He hasn't spoken for quite some time. Fly to America today and go talk to him. He's thinking about it. He says, what's going on here? Do I believe this guy? Well, maybe this is a sign from Shemayim. After parting from the Koisel, David Yisrael calls his travel agent and asks him, book me a ticket on a flight to New York. And And so, David Yisrael, the Cohen who gave his wife a divorce, finds himself on an El Al flight to the United States, and he arrives. He gets to the nursing home, and they tell him, "What are you talking about? Your father hasn't said a word in months. You expect him to communicate now?" Still, David Yisrael hadn't come all this way for nothing. He took a seat next to his father, who looked like a golem. A golem is like the way the Vilna Gaon used to make these people, like skin and bone and no nef, no shama. He just like stare at the wall. And he starts pouring out his heart to his father, telling the whole story, hoping that he's listening. Is he not listening? And suddenly the man, who had not said a word in months, opens his mouth and begins to speak. David Yisrael, my son, I have to tell you something, a secret I never told you before. He leaned closely to hear what was going to come out of his father's mouth. What information could his father possibly have to change the reality of the situation? David Yisrael, you are not my biological child. Your mother and I adopted you after the war, and we raised you as our own son. We should have told you, but we were never brave enough to share the secret with you. I never imagined that I would be so happy to tell you, David Yisrael, you are not a Cohen. You can remarry your wife. You and Shira can go raise that child together. The room exploded with happiness. The whole world erupted into dazzling color. David Yisrael laughed and he cried. But that was true joy. True incredible joy. So what are the ingredients for a successful marriage? So many people are going into marriage unprepared to work at it, unprepared to commit, to compromise, unwilling to devote themselves to making the other person happy. But they think of me. What's in it for me? But marriage is the total opposite. It's about giving, sharing, caring, and thinking about your spouse's needs and desires. Standing under the chuppah, Rabbi Desla, the famous Maggid of Musar, says, the Chassan and Kala both are givers. Each is dreaming of how I can make the other person happy. But suddenly, a year or 2 or 3 after the wedding, what starts dancing in their heads? Amen, anili mili. If I don't take care of myself, who will? Got to look out for my rights. If I don't look out for myself, who's going to look out for me? And Rav Desla says, how come you cut the pasuk in half? What about the balance of that pasuk? Imani latzmi ma'ani. But if you're only for yourself, what are you? A narcissist who cares only about yourself, who focuses on the concept of B'shvili olam nivra. The whole world was created for me. All wrong. Please remember, he says, the following pasuk, Lo la'atzmo nivra olam. This world was not created for you alone. Not just for you and your needs. You were created to do for others. To convert and take your enjoyment and share it with others. To use your happiness as an opportunity to do good deeds. Rav Desla goes on to explain to us, the greatness, your greatness, my greatness is defined by your I. Your anochi. If your eye is you alone, you're a small character in Hashem's eyes. If it's you and your wife, a little bigger. If it's you, your wife, and your kids, a little more. If it's you, your wife, and your extended families, you're even better in Hashem's eyes. If it's you and your wife and your family and your shul, you're a bigger guy. Your community, bigger. What's a gadol hador? His anochi encompasses the whole Klal Yisrael. That their radius of concern involves not just themselves, but the greater that radius is, the greater you are in God's eyes. So I have to share something with you. Recently, Manis Friedman, who's a great mashpia in dating Shalom Bayis from Chabad, Benny Friedman's father, he does a lot of work in marital therapy. And he says, what am I seeing today? In today's world where all the lines have become blurred, there's a lot of confusion and it's seeped into our frum community. People read secular books on the subject and receive misinformation. And what we're seeing today is pure selfishness. So we ask him the question, Rabbi Friedman, in what ways are spouses selfish? When you listen to the complaints that come up in marriage counseling sessions, it's all about me, he says. I want this, you want that. We can't live together. We can't compromise. I need my stuff, you need your stuff. The bottom line, it's very selfish. And that's what's going on today. We're dealing with this kind of stuff. Again, if we have a situation where ish v'isha zachu, where man and woman are zochet to build a beautiful home, The Shekhinah says, the Divine Presence says, I want to live here. And how do we know this? Have you ever been to someone's house for Shabbos? You walk in and you just feel there's a holiness to that home. And sometimes you walk into another home, it's helter-skelter, there's nothing going on there, there's no havamin of a Shabbos table. You can sense that aura in the home that works on it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not something that you just inherit and just find and just drops into your lap. Adam la'amal yulad. We were put in this world to work and to put effort into things. And when we put effort, guests can see it. Your children can sense it. So we have to take these real measures, and that's why it's important. Make the time for davening and avodas Hashem. I have a wife who's married 16 months who called me complaining, her great husband doesn't go to shul. Help, Dr. Jack, do something, get him out of bed. Doesn't go to shul. He makes it to work, but doesn't go to shul. And this is a yeshiva man. It's not the first time I hear this stuff. You know, I hear this all the time. Okay, it's nice, because they work hard, they have to make a living. You'd be shocked how fast the deterioration comes today. You'd be shocked. You can deal with a girl who's so idealistic from seminary, and she's already 2 years, 3 years after, she's doing Netflix with short skirts. I'm not saying it's all that chas v'shalom. There's a lot of good out there, but unless you keep your eye on the bar and you're doing due diligence, you can easily fall off. A successful marriage depends more on being the right person than finding the right person. You be the best that you can be. You continue to grow. You put yourself on a GPS like an escalator going forward, and your spouse will emulate you and want to be like that. It's great to marry someone you love, but it's more important to love the person you marry. The idea is to choose your love and then love your choice. It's up to you to make your marriage happy and satisfying, which means that it's not a passive process whatsoever. It's highly active and highly proactive.